I didn't merely flee. I meticulously obliterated my former self. I gathered my meager possessions, a ghost dissolving into the night, after her searing betrayal, a deafening crack that echoed from her hand across my face, at her birthday dinner, witnessed by a grinning audience of friends and family. A significant passage of time later, fate orchestrated my return. A cryptic summons arrived, drawing me to an exclusive conclave of financial titans in the very city I had abandoned. Upon landing, a seismic tremor of revelation awaited, a brutal awakening concerning the woman who was once my wife. Do you know that chilling sensation of standing on the precipice, believing you're about to leap into a boundless ocean of beauty, only to realize, mid-air, that you're plummeting into your own freshly dug grave? That was me, on the eve of Delilah's supposed celebration, crafting what I believed would be the perfect, unforgettable night. For countless agonizing months, not weeks, but an eternity of meticulous planning. Every single detail had to be flawless, because that, I convinced myself, was what Delilah deserved. Or perhaps, it was what I desperately needed to believe, even as I bled my savings dry on extravagances that would bankrupt most mortals. The rooftop venue alone commanded a king's ransom, $3,000. Yet, this was no mere rooftop. This was the penthouse terrace at the Meridian, a sanctuary of glass with panoramic vistas where the city sprawled beneath us, a glittering tapestry of ambition. The river snaked through downtown, a silver serpent under a sky ablaze with a million distant stars scattered like diamonds across black velvet. It was the kind of view that silenced every tongue, compelling awe. The wine? Do not even provoke me. I had cases flown in a mythical French vintage, Chateau something or other, that the sommelier swore was absolutely transcendent. $400 a bottle, and I procured enough to ensure every guest would be properly intoxicated, utterly unburdened by the fear of scarcity. This was the nectar of the gods, not the paltry swill that tasted like it had been filtered through a gym sock. And then, the quartet. Not some hopeful college novices, but maestros whose instruments had wept and soared in symphony halls, gracing the nuptials of celebrities whose names would undoubtedly roll off your tongue. They were positioned in a hallowed corner, their instruments gleaming under the delicate cascade of string lights, installed specifically for this grand illusion. The cake, a culinary marvel, stood as its own masterpiece. 3 opulent tiers of rich Belgian chocolate, custom designed with edible gold leaf and sugar flowers so meticulously crafted, one might believe they were plucked directly from a mythical garden. The master baker had toiled for weeks, perfecting every minute detail, each petal, each glimmer of gold, a silent homage to Delilah's imagined journey, her love for art, her unspoken dreams of distant lands. I had orchestrated everything with the precision of a master tactician, a grand symphony mapped out like a military operation. Guests would arrive as the sun began its descent, mingling with cocktails, watching the sky ignite in a blaze of impossible colors. The quartet would commence their melody as the last vestiges of daylight bled from the horizon, weaving a magical, ethereal atmosphere. Then, the exquisite dinner, catered by that exclusive downtown establishment, followed by the cake, the speeches, and, I desperately hoped, Delilah's gaze, reflecting me as the greatest man who ever drew breath. But fate, in its cruelest irony, often reserves its most brutal punchlines for moments of heightened anticipation. When the moment arrived for Delilah to deliver her speech of gratitude, I stood there, a foolish mask of hopeful anticipation plastered across my face, hungering for even a passing acknowledgement of my monumental efforts. She lavished praise upon her sister, Bianca, for her unwavering presence. She lauded her mother for nurturing her into the woman she had become. She acknowledged her friends for imbuing her life with meaning. She even deigned to thank the damned waitstaff for their diligent service. But me, the architect of this entire fantastical evening, the man who had toiled since the deepest winter, who had obsessed over every infinitesimal detail, who had bled his savings dry to manifest her dreams for a single, ephemeral night? Nothing. Not a whisper, not even a fleeting glance in my direction. In that agonizing silence, a chasm began to yawn within my soul. Not a sudden, violent shatter, but a deep, insidious fissure, like a crystal glass dropped, preserving its form yet riddled with hairline fractures, awaiting only the next impact to splinter into irreparable fragments. You know what? Delilah's voice, a blade honed on contempt, sliced through the festive din, severing conversations. Her gaze was fixed upon me now, but it was not the look I had yearned for. Her eyes held that familiar, glacial detachment, the one that preceded her calculated vivisection of anyone who dared to disappoint her. "The whole vibe here feels off," she declared, her tone dripping with disdain, like someone's trying too hard to impress, instead of just letting things happen naturally. My gut twisted into a knot of sickening dread. Every eye was now upon me, conversations dissolving one by one as the scent of impending drama permeated the air. "I mean, seriously," she continued, a dismissive wave of her hand encompassing the meticulously curated tableau of my efforts. "This whole setup screams desperation. It's like someone watched too many romantic comedies and thought they could buy their way into affection." Then, she began her slow, deliberate march towards me, her heels clicking on the rooftop tiles like a grim countdown. For a fleeting, desperate moment, I imagined she might whisper an apology, perhaps overwhelmed by the spectacle, a secret understanding. Instead, she pulled back her hand, and the resounding crack ripped through the air, my ears ringing with the force of her blow. The sound echoed across the rooftop like a gunshot. Then came the chilling chorus of mocking amusement, not from every guest, but from enough to make it feel as if the entire world had conspired to point and laugh at the man who had dared to try too hard, and failed so spectacularly, so publicly. Her sister, Bianca, wore a knowing smirk, as if this moment had been the crescendo of her evening's anticipation. Her mother simply shook her head, a silent tableau of disappointment, as if I were a careless child who had shattered something irreplaceable. I could have retaliated, could have launched a furious defense, enumerated every sacrifice, ignited a scene of my own. But to what end? Standing there, my face burning with humiliation, my dignity in shattered fragments at my feet, a truth, long overdue, pierced through the haze of despair. You cannot compel love with a deluge of dollars, and a fractured relationship cannot be mended with opulent celebrations. So, I performed the only act that retained any semblance of sense. I straightened my jacket, met the myriad gazes of those who stared as if I were a grotesque spectacle, and walked away without uttering a single, solitary word. Not to Delilah, not to anyone. I simply dissolved, a phantom fading into the encroaching darkness of my own girlfriend's ruined birthday. That very night, as she likely reveled in my humiliation, I began my metamorphosis. I meticulously packed everything that held meaning into 2 silent suitcases, secured my external hard drives, the digital repository of my shattered career, emptied my savings account, and drove out of town, leaving no trace. No farewell note, no dramatic final calls. I simply ceased to exist for them, vanishing from their lives as if I had been an illusion all along. I drove relentlessly westward, until the perpetual weeping of the Oregon rain became my constant companion, a place where questions about a man arriving with his entire existence crammed into a humble Civic were conspicuously absent. The name change was not a theatrical gesture, but a deliberate shedding of skin. Damon Cross resonated with a quiet strength, memorable yet free of suspicion. My journey led me to Cedar Falls, a tranquil town of perhaps 8,000 souls, where I found a modest sanctuary above an antique bookstore, Frederick's literary haven. The air was a comforting blend of old paper and freshly brewed coffee, the creaking floorboards announcing every subtle movement. Frederick himself, a sweet old man, possessed a wild mane of Einstein-esque hair and spectacles held together with electrical tape. He offered the upstairs space for a pittance, $400 a month, utilities included. As I handed him the first month's rent in cash, he simply nodded, his eyes holding a profound understanding. "We all have our reasons for needing a fresh start, son," he mused. "As long as you don't burn the place down or shatter the peace with loud music after 10, we'll get along just fine." That man, a silent sentinel, never once dared to breach the fragile privacy of my new existence. By day, I embraced any toil that presented itself. Construction became my crucible. Roofing jobs that left my back screaming in protest, my hands raw and bleeding. Electrical work demanded I crawl through attics that transformed into infernos in the summer heat. Moving jobs saw me hefting the collected lives of strangers, each box a grim echo of how I had dismantled my own. But under the shroud of night, the true alchemy began. After 10 grueling hours of manual labor, when my muscles shrieked and most mortals sought solace in the television's glow, I would crack open my laptop and plunge into the digital abyss I had once abandoned. Finance, coding, digital marketing, the forgotten arts I had merely dabbled in, now became my obsession. I began cautiously devouring YouTube tutorials on cryptocurrency, dissecting every finance blog I could find. In those early, brutal months, I sacrificed a king's ransom to the fickle gods of speculative fortune, losing thousands on a ludicrous altcoin named Moon Doge that crashed harder than my shattered relationship with Delilah. I was ensnared by a fake trading platform, another hefty sum vanishing before the chilling realization dawned. But here's the profound truth. Each stumble, each precipitous fall, carved a new lesson into my very being. Every mistake sharpened my intellect, honed my caution, ignited a fiercer determination. In the crucible of relentless effort, I transcended mere learning. I began to earn. I plunged into the world of property, acquiring dilapidated husks no one else desired, and with my own hands and vision, breathed new life into them, transforming them into havens people would actually yearn to inhabit. No grand embellishments, just unyielding, honest work that forged undeniable value. I would acquire a property for a modest sum, invest a fraction more in materials and unrelenting sweat equity, and sell it for a significant profit. Simple arithmetic, unwavering prosperity. The volatile world of crypto also began to yield its bounty. Once I abandoned the siren call of get-rich-quick schemes and embraced the discipline of genuine investment, I established shell companies, an impenetrable fortress of legality. I diversified my portfolio, playing the long, strategic game rather than chasing fleeting home runs. As seasons turned into an unstoppable ascent, I became the unseen architect, the silent force behind 2 burgeoning online consulting firms. My face remained hidden, my true name unspoken. Yet I was the one crafting the audacious strategies that transformed failing enterprises into roaring triumphs. Corporations sought out my firms to rectify their marketing, streamline their complex operations, and catapult their profits. They remained blissfully unaware that the mastermind behind their staggering resurgence was a phantom living above a quaint bookstore in remote Oregon. Then it arrived, a cryptic summons, embossed on exquisite cream-colored paper, adorned with calligraphy of breathtaking perfection. No return address, no postmark, no stamp. Only the stark, elegant words, "Mr. Cross, your reputation in certain circles has not gone unnoticed. We cordially invite you to attend an exclusive summit for emerging global investors, the Grand View Resort, Riverview." The invitation was a deliberate echo, summoning me back to my old hometown on the very weekend of Delilah's birthday. At Riverview Airport, Maxwell Lynn awaited me, a ghost from a past life. I had met him once, fleetingly, at a networking event Delilah had dragged me to, one of those smooth-talking investor types, a financial parasite who thrived by siphoning wealth from others. Yet, he knew all my identities. He extended a copy of the Riverview Herald, its headline a dagger to my gut. Local entrepreneur arrested in $7.6 million investor scam. Emblazoned on the front page was Delilah's image, a tableau of humiliation. In handcuffs, being led away by federal agents, her makeup streaked, her hair a wild, disheveled tangle, as if she had wept for an eternity. She had masterminded a fraudulent equity firm, Trinity Investment Solutions, with a cohort named Jeremy Kane. A classic Ponzi scheme, a deceitful tapestry woven from greed and shattered trust, taking vast sums from unsuspecting investors, promising astronomical returns on a revolutionary tech startup that existed only in their lies. But when the long arm of the law finally closed in, Delilah had attempted to lay the entire edifice of blame at my feet, declaring me the phantom mastermind who had absconded with $2 million. They're looking for Silas Ward. She's attempting to frame you, Maxwell stated, his voice a grim pronouncement. She told investigators you were the true puppet master, that you had cajoled her into creating the sham company before cutting ties and vanishing when the heat intensified. He presented me with a federal wanted poster, adorned with the ghostly image of my old driver's license photo. But here is the unyielding truth of years of meticulous, almost obsessive, strategic layering. It pays profound dividends when the vengeful specter of your past attempts to ensnare you in federal crimes. I had spent countless days and nights forging multiple identities, meticulously constructing an impenetrable labyrinth of paper trails designed to exonerate me, maintaining meticulous, unassailable records of every single transaction. I possessed irrefutable bank statements detailing the precise genesis of my every dollar, unassailable data proving my continuous presence in Oregon throughout the entirety of Delilah's nefarious scheme. Business partners, veritable pillars of the industry, stood ready to verify the legitimacy of my consulting empire. With astonishing speed, within hours of that damning headline, I had legal titans in 3 different states scrutinizing my documentation. Not merely lawyers, but high-powered defense attorneys whose hourly fees eclipsed the weekly earnings of most ordinary mortals. As my formidable legal team meticulously constructed my defense, I activated a strategic alliance. I reached out to Ray Patel, an investigative reporter of formidable repute, who owed me a significant debt for my assistance in exposing a cryptocurrency fraud targeting vulnerable elderly investors. Ray worked with unrelenting fervor for nearly 2 full days, fact-checking every infinitesimal detail, weaving a narrative that would shatter the existing script. The article exploded online at the dawn's earliest light, its headline a clarion call: "The Ghost Builder, From Silence to Empire." She painted me as a brilliant, resilient entrepreneur who had forged himself anew from the ashes of public humiliation, a man unjustly targeted again by the narcissistic architect of his original downfall, whose own criminal schemes had finally imploded. The response was immediate, a tidal wave of support. Social media erupted in a chorus of solidarity. Esteemed financial news outlets seized upon the story. Mere days later, federal prosecutors issued a public statement, acknowledging the review of new, compelling evidence, definitively declaring Silas Ward no longer a person of interest. Indeed, they were now actively investigating how Delilah had illicitly obtained and brazenly misused my personal information. I arrived at the Grand View Resort's charity gala, clad in the impeccable armor of a triumphant titan, a bespoke charcoal Armani suit, its fabric whispering of power, and the understated glint of a platinum Rolex. Stepping through those imposing, polished oak doors felt like traversing a forgotten portal back into my past. Yet I was no longer the shattered man who had vanished from this world. The main ballroom was a symphony of opulence, crystal chandeliers raining light, polished marble floors reflecting the glow, tables draped in pristine white linen. It was perhaps 20 minutes before my gaze found her. Delilah held court near the bar, a queen in a stunning black gown. Yet if one looked closely enough, the fissures in her carefully constructed facade were starkly visible. The forced strain in her smile, the almost imperceptible tremor in her hand as she raised her wine glass, the way her eyes darted nervously, like a cornered animal anticipating a predator. Our eyes met across a mere 15 feet of crowded dance floor, and the very fabric of reality seemed to rip. Delilah's face became a kaleidoscope of warring emotions: confusion, dawning recognition, raw disbelief, then fear, quickly followed by anger, and finally, something that strangely resembled relief. In that fractured moment, her grip faltered, and the crystal shattered against the marble, a deafening chime that cut through the ambient hum. Crimson wine bloomed across the pristine linen, a stark, visceral stain, like blood on fresh snow. I could have seized the moment, could have unveiled myself, declaring to every startled guest that the enigmatic businessman from the viral headlines stood before them. Instead, I simply nodded. One small, almost imperceptible acknowledgement that, yes, I saw her. Yes, I was truly here. And yes, the world she knew had irrevocably shifted. That single nod, a silent pronouncement, spoke volumes. It was about power, the quiet, indomitable force that emanates from the unshakable certainty of ultimate victory. A couple of agonizing nights later, a tentative, almost fragile tapping echoed at the door of my penthouse suite. It was Delilah. Her mascara streaked her tear-ravaged face, her hair a wild, disheveled tangle, and she was clad in a rumpled designer dress, as if she had worn it for days, sleeping in its expensive folds. "Silas," she whispered, the sound of my true name. After all this time, a visceral tremor that resonated deeper than I anticipated. "Please, I know I don't deserve this, but I need to speak with you." I admitted her, a silent sentinel, and poured her a glass of water. "Jeremy." He turned on me. She rasped, her voice barely a whisper, a threat of fear. "The federal prosecutors offered him a deal if he would testify against me. He took it. He said I was the mastermind, that I had manipulated him into helping with the scam." Then, she performed an act that, years ago, would have ripped my heart anew. She crumpled to her knees, a broken silhouette against the opulent carpet of my suite. "I know I hurt you. I know I was horrible to you that night. And I know I don't deserve your help. But please, Silas, I'm terrified. I don't know what to do." And then, the tears came. Genuine tears, raw and unbidden, unlike the practiced theatrics of her past. I allowed her to weep, perhaps for 5 long minutes, simply standing, observing this woman who had once made me feel utterly worthless, now reduced to a pleading, broken figure at my feet. When her gaze finally lifted to meet mine, I delivered the unvarnished truth. "Delilah, I am no longer consumed by anger towards you. For a long time, its bitterness was my constant companion, but that time has passed. Do you know why? Because raging against you is as futile as raging against a scorpion's sting. It is simply your nature. It is who you are. The truth is, I no longer care. Not about your legal quagmire. Not about Jeremy. Not about whatever fresh hell you've conjured for yourself this time. You didn't merely lose me when you delivered that resounding slap. You severed your access to the very essence of my being. And that, Delilah, is something you will never reclaim." At the Global Investment Summit, I stood as the undisputed architect of my own destiny, poised to deliver the keynote address before 300 of the nation's most formidable investors. Years ago, I began, my voice echoing with quiet authority. I disappeared, not to hide from the world's judgment, but to forge myself anew, to discover who I was when no external gaze sought to define me. Most of you are now acquainted with the headlines that painted my story, but they neglect to tell you the most crucial truth. None of that truly matters. What truly matters is what you construct when no one is applauding. The air in the room crackled with an almost tangible energy. I spent those transformative years learning that true redemption is not found in the bitter taste of revenge or the hollow echo of vindication, but in transcending the very need for such trifles. Success is not about proving you were right all along. It's about forging a self so formidable, so self-sufficient, that the whispers of external validation become meaningless. A thunderous ovation erupted, sustained and fervent, but I offered only a single, measured nod and walked off stage, leaving the echoes of my triumph in my wake. The relentless spectacle of Delilah's trial stretched on for weeks. I graced it with my presence for a single day, when her desperate lawyer attempted a Hail Mary pass, striving once more to cast the blame upon me. Judge Morrison, a figure of uncompromising authority, summarily dismissed the desperate ploy. "Mr. Ward is not on trial here," he declared, his voice resonating with finality. "The evidence unequivocally demonstrates his complete non-involvement in Trinity Investment Solutions." Jeremy, already a turncoat, had long since testified, detailing her elaborate orchestration of the entire criminal enterprise. The jury, with chilling swiftness, deliberated for less than 6 hours. The verdict was swift and unforgiving. Guilty on all counts, consigning her to 6 years within federal walls and the crushing burden of restitution. When the dust settled and justice had run its course, a year later, I unveiled the Ward Center for Resilient Youth in Riverview, a state-of-the-art sanctuary for foster children and teenagers whom the world had callously written off. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, a young voice from the crowd, filled with innocent wonder, pierced the air. "Are you the legend? The man who came back stronger?" I smiled then, a genuine, radiant smile, perhaps the first true one in years. "I am the man," I replied, my voice carrying a profound certainty, "who learned the profound art of disappearing, not to vanish, but to truly find myself." Sometimes, the phantom memory of that night still surfaces. The imported wine, the bespoke cake, the cruel laughter that followed the slap. But it no longer stings. It is merely a story, an echo of someone I used to be. Someone who mistakenly believed his worth was contingent upon the approval of others. That brutal slap on the rooftop did not define me. It was the catalyst that revealed the man I was destined to become. Once I ceased striving to be what others demanded. For sometimes, the most potent vengeance against betrayal is not a fiery retribution, but a total, absolute disappearance. A vanishing act so profound that they grasp the true magnitude of their loss only when the echoes of your presence have long faded into an unrecoverable abyss. Thank you for joining us on Echo Tales. If this story of resilience and retribution stirred something within you, please share your reflections in the comments below. Your insights fuel our journey, and we eagerly anticipate your thoughts. And do not forget to subscribe to our channel, for a trove of even more captivating and dramatic narratives awaits you, ready to unfold in the episodes to come. Until next time, keep listening, keep wondering, and remember, every silence holds a story.